For decades, Billy Crystal and Rob Reiner were seen as one of Hollywood's most genuine creative partnerships, a friendship built on sharp humor, mutual respect, and a shared understanding of storytelling that left a permanent mark on film history. To the public, their bond appeared effortless, almost too perfect. Interviews were filled with laughter, behind-the-scenes stories sounded warm and nostalgic, and fans believed they had witnessed a rare example of loyalty that survived fame, pressure, and time. But after Rob Reiner's death, that image began to shift in ways no one expected. In recent revelations, Billy Crystal has finally spoken with a level of honesty he had never allowed himself before. His words weren't angry or dramatic. They were calm, reflective, and deeply revealing. For years, Crystal carried truths about their relationship that stayed buried out of respect, timing, and a desire to protect a legacy larger than either of them. Now, with Reiner gone, that silence has ended, and what Crystal has shared is forcing fans to re-examine everything they thought they understood about their friendship. What makes this admission so powerful is not scandal, but complexity. It's a reminder that even the closest bonds can carry unspoken tensions, creative clashes, and emotional distance hidden behind smiles and success. Crystal's confession doesn't tear Reiner down, it humanizes him. And in doing so, it reveals a side of Hollywood friendship rarely discussed. The cost of collaboration, the weight of loyalty, and the truths that sometimes can only be spoken after goodbye. Billy Crystal and Rob Reiner's connection didn't begin as a grand Hollywood alliance. It grew slowly, shaped by shared instincts, long conversations, and a mutual understanding of comedy that went beyond punchlines. Both men came from backgrounds where humor wasn't just entertainment, it was survival, observation, and timing. When they first began working closely, there was an immediate sense of trust. Each recognized in the other someone who understood not just how to make people laugh, but why laughter mattered. To the outside world, their partnership looked effortless. Projects came together smoothly, interviews sparkled with warmth, and behind-the-scenes stories painted a picture of creative harmony. But what fans rarely saw was how intensely both men cared about control, vision, and authorship. Crystal was meticulous, deeply protective of character and rhythm. Reiner, equally passionate, approached storytelling with a director's authority and long-term vision. Early on, this dynamic worked beautifully. Their differences sharpened the work rather than weakening it. As their collaborations gained recognition, the pressure increased. Success has a way of amplifying unspoken tensions. Decisions that once felt collaborative began to carry more weight. Small disagreements about pacing, tone, or emphasis lingered longer than they used to. Neither man was confrontational by nature, and that shared trait became both a strength and a weakness. Rather than openly clashing, they often chose restraint, letting issues settle quietly instead of addressing them head-on. Billy Crystal later reflected that this silence was never about resentment. It was about respect. He admired Reiner deeply, his instincts, his discipline, his commitment to story. But admiration can coexist with frustration. As Reiner's confidence as a filmmaker grew, so did his certainty. Crystal, meanwhile, was evolving as a performer, becoming more aware of his own creative voice. The balance between them subtly shifted, and with it, the ease that once defined their partnership. Publicly, nothing appeared wrong. They continued to speak fondly of one another, to celebrate shared successes, and to honor the work they had done together. Fans took these moments at face value, never suspecting that beneath the affection was a relationship adapting, sometimes awkwardly, to change. Hollywood thrives on narratives of perfect friendships, and both men understood the value of protecting that image, not for publicity, but for legacy. After Rob Reiner's death, Billy Crystal finally allowed himself to acknowledge what had gone unsaid. Not to diminish Reiner, but to tell the truth about a friendship that was real precisely because it wasn't flawless. He admitted that there were moments of distance, times when creative alignment gave way to individual paths. These weren't betrayals or falling outs. They were the natural consequences of two strong personalities growing in different directions. Section 1 establishes the foundation of this story. A bond built on respect, shaped by ambition, and tested by success. Billy Crystal's admission doesn't rewrite history. It deepens it. It reminds us that even the most admired partnerships are human, sustained not by perfection, but by compromise, silence, and an unspoken agreement to keep moving forward together, even when the rhythm changes as time went on. The dynamic between Billy Crystal and Rob Reiner quietly shifted in ways that were almost invisible from the outside. Their friendship didn't fracture, it stretched. Success has a way of changing the emotional geometry between people, especially when both individuals are strong-willed, creative, and deeply invested in their work. What once felt like effortless collaboration slowly became something more measured, more careful, and occasionally more distant. Billy Crystal later acknowledged that one of the most difficult parts of their relationship was how rarely they spoke about conflict directly. Both men valued harmony. Neither wanted to disrupt what they had built, and neither wanted to appear ungrateful for the success they shared. As a result, creative disagreements were often softened, postponed, or quietly absorbed. Over time, that restraint created emotional residue, not anger, but unresolved tension that never fully disappeared. Reiner's role behind the camera increasingly placed him in a position of authority. He was the director, the decision-maker, the one shaping the final vision. Crystal respected that deeply, but it didn't mean it was always easy. As Crystal matured creatively, he became more aware of his own instincts, his own ideas about pacing, tone, and character depth. When those instincts didn't fully align with Reiner's vision, Crystal often chose silence over confrontation. Not because he lacked conviction, but because he valued the relationship more than the argument. From the public's perspective, everything still looked warm. Interviews remained friendly. Stories shared on talk shows were affectionate and nostalgic. This wasn't an act. The affection was real. But affection doesn't erase complexity. Crystal later admitted that there were moments when he felt emotionally sidelined, unsure of where he stood creatively. Reiner, focused on the broader scope of filmmaking, may not have fully realized how those moments landed. And that, Crystal suggested, was where the real distance formed, not through intent, but through assumption. What makes this period especially poignant is how both men continued to protect each other's reputations. There was never an attempt to correct the public narrative or inject nuance into their story. Silence became a shared language. By choosing not to speak openly about their differences, they preserved the image of unity, but at the cost of emotional honesty. Crystal later described this as the hardest part, knowing that truth and loyalty were sometimes pulling in opposite directions. As their careers evolved, their paths naturally diverged. New projects, new collaborations, and new priorities filled the spaces where shared work once lived. The friendship didn't end. It aged. Conversations became less frequent. Time passed more quickly between interactions. When they did reconnect, there was warmth, but also a quiet awareness that something had changed and could not be fully restored. After Reiner's passing, Billy Crystal reflected on this era with striking clarity. He didn't frame it as regret, but as realism. He acknowledged that they had both done what they believed was right at the time. Yet he also admitted that some truths had remained locked away, spoken only internally. Not because they were damaging, but because there never seemed to be a right moment. Section 2 deepens the story beyond nostalgia. It reveals a friendship shaped not by betrayal or conflict, but by restraint. By two men who cared enough to avoid confrontation, even when honesty might have brought relief. And as Crystal would later admit, sometimes the things left unsaid carry the greatest emotional weight, especially when time removes the chance to say them at all. As the years passed, Billy Crystal began to view his history with Rob Reiner through a more reflective lens. Distance has a way of clarifying emotions that feel too tangled in the moment. And for Crystal, time softened the edges while sharpening the truth. Their friendship was never defined by a single disagreement or falling out. Instead, it was shaped by accumulation, years of shared success layered with moments of quiet misunderstanding that were never fully addressed. Crystal has since admitted that one of the hardest realizations came later in life. Both he and Reiner assumed the other understood without needing explanation. They believed respect was obvious, loyalty was implied, and affection didn't require constant reaffirmation. In many ways, this assumption worked. It allowed them to collaborate smoothly and maintain a public image of unity. But privately, It also created emotional gaps where clarity might have existed if either had spoken more openly. There were times when Crystal felt he was being seen primarily as a performer rather than a creative equal. He respected Reiner's authority as a director, yet occasionally struggled with feeling creatively contained. These feelings were never explosive. Reiner, for his part, remained deeply focused on the larger picture of storytelling. His drive, confidence, and certainty were strengths that propelled projects forward. But those same qualities sometimes left little space for dialogue once decisions were made. Crystal now believes this wasn't intentional. It was the natural byproduct of leadership and of two people trusting that their bond was strong enough to withstand silence. After Rob Reiner's death, these realizations took on new weight. Crystal spoke about how grief has a way of unlocking honesty. Not anger, not blame, honesty. He acknowledged that there were conversations he wished they had shared, not to resolve conflict, but to understand each other more fully. The loss wasn't just of a friend, but of the opportunity to revisit moments that had been left unexplored. What stands out in Crystal's reflections is the absence of bitterness. His words carry tenderness rather than regret. He doesn't speak of mistakes, but of human limitation. Two driven people, moving quickly through demanding careers, sometimes lack the space to pause and speak plainly. In protecting the work, they sometimes neglected the emotional maintenance of the relationship behind it. This section of the story reveals why Crystal waited until after Reiner's passing to speak more openly. It wasn't fear. It was respect. He understood that public honesty, while important, can also reshape how a person is remembered. Crystal didn't want to complicate Reiner's legacy while he was alive. Only after his passing did it feel appropriate to add nuance, not to diminish, but to complete the picture. Section 3 captures the emotional heart of Billy Crystal's admission. It's not about exposing flaws or settling scores. It's about acknowledging that even the strongest friendships can carry unspoken truths, and that silence, while protective, often comes at a cost. Crystal's reflections don't rewrite their story. They deepen it, reminding us that behind celebrated partnerships are human relationships shaped by timing, restraint, and the things we assume don't need to be said. After Rob Reiner's death, Billy Crystal found himself confronting a silence that could no longer be managed or postponed. Grief has a way of stripping away performance, leaving only honesty behind. What Crystal finally admitted wasn't a secret meant to shock the public, but a truth meant to settle something within himself. The friendship he shared with Reiner had been real, meaningful, and creatively powerful, but it had also been incomplete in ways that only time and loss could fully reveal. Crystal explained that speaking now felt different. While Reiner was alive, there was always the possibility of another conversation, another shared moment, another chance to reconnect. That possibility made silence feel temporary. Death changed that. Suddenly, the things left unsaid were no longer delayed. They were permanent. And it was only then that Crystal allowed himself to acknowledge the emotional weight of those unfinished thoughts. What he finally admitted was simple, yet profound. He and Reiner loved and respected each other deeply. But they didn't always understand each other as fully as they believed. Their bond was built on mutual admiration and shared success, but it relied heavily on assumption. They assumed the other felt valued. They assumed loyalty was obvious. They assumed time would always allow space to talk things through later. In the end, later never came. Crystal was careful not to frame this realization as regret. Instead, he described it as awareness. He doesn't wish he had confronted Reiner or challenged him publicly. He wishes instead that he had trusted the friendship enough to be more emotionally transparent, not in moments of conflict, but in moments of calm. The truth he admitted wasn't about tension or resentment. It was about missed opportunities for deeper understanding. In sharing this now, Crystal also offered something universal. His reflection wasn't just about Rob Reiner, it was about how men, especially in high-pressure creative environments, often communicate. Success rewards productivity, not vulnerability. Harmony is valued over honesty. And in trying to protect relationships, people sometimes avoid the very conversations that could strengthen them. Crystal's admission resonates because it speaks to that quiet, familiar pattern. Public reaction to his words has been overwhelmingly empathetic. Fans haven't responded with disappointment or disillusionment. Instead, many see the story as more authentic than the polished version they once believed. The friendship between Crystal and Reiner wasn't weakened by this truth. It was humanized. Their collaboration remains iconic, but now it carries emotional depth alongside professional admiration. Section 4 brings the story to its true conclusion, not with drama, but with clarity. Billy Crystal didn't wait until after Rob Reiner's death to speak because he feared the truth. He waited because he respected the man, the work, and the legacy they built together. And now, in finally admitting what had long remained unspoken, Crystal isn't closing he's completing a. In the end, the truth Billy Crystal shared is one many people recognize in their own lives. That love and respect do not eliminate the need for honest conversation, and that silence, while sometimes protective, can also become a burden. His admission isn't a confession of failure, it's a quiet reminder to speak while time still allows it.